Invocations and Dedications. 1. I address my invocation to Ahura Mazda, and I invoke among guardian beings the chief of the House Lord, and the chief of the Vice Lord, and the chief of the Zantu Lord, and I invoke the chief of the Province Lord, and the chief of women I invoke the Mazdayastian faith, the blessed and good Herende, her who is the Holy One of humankind. I invoke this holy earth which bears us. 2. And I invoke the friendly and most helpful persons, Lord, the fire of Ahura Mazda, and also the most energetic lords of holy men, those who are most strenuous in their care of cattle and the fields, and the chief of the thrifty tiller of the earth. And I invoke the steady settler of sanctity, and the chief of the charioteer. 3. And I invoke the chief of the fire priest by means of the most imposing sciences of the Mazdayastian faith. And I invoke the chief of the Athravan and his peoples. I invoke, yea, the lords of each of them. I invoke these lords, and I summon the bountiful immortals here, and the prophets who shall serve us, the wisest as they are, the most scrupulous in their exactness as they utter words of doctrine and service, the most devoted to their duties likewise, and the most glorious in their thoughts. And I invoke the most imposing forces of the Mazdayastian faith, and the fire priests I invoke, and the charioteers, the warriors, and the thrifty tillers of the soil. 4. And to you, O ye bountiful immortals, ye who rule aright, and dispose of all aright, I offer the flesh of my very frame, and all the blessings of my life. Thus the two spirits thought, thus they spoke, and thus they did. 5. And therefore, as thou, O Ahura Mazda, didst think, speak, dispose, and do all things good for us, so to thee would we give, so would we assign to thee our homage, so would we worship thee with our sacrifices, so would we bow before thee with these gifts, and so direct our prayers to thee with confessions of our debt. 6. By the kinship of the good kindred, by that righteousness, the good, thy righteous servant's nature, would we approach thee, and by that of the good thrift law, and of the piety, the good. 7. And we would worship the Vivasha of the kind of blessed gift, and of that of the holy Gaya Maratan, and we would worship the holy Vivasha of Zarathustra Spitama the saint. Yea, that one of beings do we worship whose better service in the sacrifice of Ahura Mazda knows. Even those women do we worship whose better service thus is known. Yea, both holy men and women do we worship whom Ahura Mazda knows. As the Ahu is excelling, so is our Ratu, one who rules from the righteous order, a creator of mental goodness and of life's action done for Mazda, and the kingdom is to Ahura, which to the poor may offer nurture. A blessing is the right to be called the best. There is a wheel to this man or woman, when toward righteousness best he does right. 8. We worship the Ahuna area, and we worship Asha Bahista, the best, the bountiful immortal, and we sacrifice to the Ha Fra Arete, even to the confession and laudation of the Mazdayastian faith. And so we hear the reference that Zarathustra wasn't the only prophet. And does it say he's the final one? No. And well, he does say that there will be a final one, and that sort of stuff. But the Sayashant, there's going to and think of some of this, not only benedictions upon, but like how in the Quran it talks about make mention of, and our word worship in English is not quite what we may think it is from a previous generation, because the respectful, the individuals you're offering respect to would be referred to in that way. And we're in Yasna 10 with our comment. And number 11, the heights of many pathways. Wait, now this. Okay, that doesn't look right. So the pathways of the birds. So Hogue follows Spiegel and Justy. Gergrati as above. Okay, that slightly confused because I way off of where I had my bookmarks. Is fit for and grown in verse 14. Sa'un, oh wait, no. Which is seen as mine well grown. Ga'enis seems always used in an evil sense later in the Avesta. The murderous woman's emptiness, with the intellect dethroned, I would correct to a form of kraftu and compare the avoiding the service mentioned by the Pahlavi translator on Yasna 53:5. Oh, sometimes I guess when she sits at home, sometimes stuff would be mentioned that the translators are going to omit. Sometimes that's just because there's more meaning and they're like trying to make it compact, but sometimes there's some deliberateness. So it's important to try to preserve the original of some of these things. And verse 16 to the 5, I belong, the ha'ama is thought to be speaking here. And the golden chalice over in verse 17. Here the priest evidently manipulates the cups containing the ha'ama juice. And if I've seen, not in person, but I've seen video of these ceremonies. Yeah, they spend like an hour and a half, 3 hours or something, reading the yasnas and moving around fruit and whatnot. The application of the term, the gathas, here seems to point to a high antiquity for the ha'ama yast, if not in the present piece, which is not so old as the gathas. And in the previous hymns to ha'ama, of which this yast is important, are extension. Well, perhaps the yasts are to sort of replace gathas that were lost. Maybe there were 72 gathas. And Neryo sang in the place of thy teachings, figuratively, Ya kasket asvandana, and again the health and parting, Saundaryam, and a comparison is drawn with the Yieldest Thou food, well, the Lord's Prayer, which was really copied from something 4 centuries earlier. But we would also compare to Yasna 48:5. I mean, the New Testament, the 2 versions of that. The Yen Ha Hatam follows the mention of the saint in verse 21. And then we have the prelude to the home offering. This characteristic fragment is repeated and extended in the later literature of the Parsis, the curse of the cow, horse, and of ha'ama. Silaset, the priest, when they are stinted, was extended to all domestic animals. It has been difficult to avoid the full metrical rhythm of the original, with its jingling cadence. A full freedom is also not avoided. And not to the priest, our Yoseng has grehitaram. In that first note, the cow cries to her driver, And then we mentioned the who foddered. Slander followed. Who foddered fairly does not use me. Okay. Who does not give me cooked food seems improbable. If the havastam means fodder, why is it feminine? Especially here with the feminine correlative. I think that having good food is the meaning of the word as an adjective, and agreeing with Gam understood, possibly who does not bestow upon me as the one well foddered. And the delicate use, the spanner of the racers. And that's from verse 2. No head smiter am I. We have light is the intoxication of ha'ama. Other intoxications smite the head, like alcohol and stuff. Well, again, ha'ama was generally used as a enhancer rather than just getting loaded by itself, really. Hence, like, originally it was taken like, well, this is going to be a medicinal dose, but not, deathbed dose, maybe. But having death afar, holy ha'ama far from death. And thus spake Zarathustra, which, I don't know, maybe a phrase like that provoked Nietzsche, right? Maybe not. Oh, that's 24. The poetic reproduction has been long among the ancient dead, and observed the threefold division of the earth. The mid-third, the ancient Persians thought of the earth as you can view the stars different, the tropics, and then the other two portions, right? Fran Gracian was a Turanian king. The Rapsat at present hands the Ha'ama cup to the priest at this point. The efficacy of the liquor is supposed to be multiplied. Pen da id ya'e is to be read, of course. The letter is not unlike in a manuscript when turned was probably half inverted. And so the 5 making it the 4 in verse 9. Oh, is where we're sharing there. Who serve you with zeal. This seems to be rendered by the Pahlavi as an interlude between the Ratu and the Za'atar. Compare Yasna 28, verse 11. Several broken sentences from other parts of the Avesta are here doubtfully recalled, perhaps as having a special sanctity. The Raspe, to thee, O holy Ha'ama, brings the Ha'ama vessel to the bearsman at this point, and touching its stand, the Mahru lays a cloth on the right hand of the Za'atar, who, looking at the vessel, proceeds to recite as follows in verse 10. Now, going over this, we may go over some of the symbolism. What is it, the right hand accepting, or is it the right hand giving? Well, the left hand taking. Whatever one of those you're taking in, because invoking, whatever. But rumbly and the tumbly here. Yasna 8 verses 5 and 8 can be compared here to thy will, O Lord. And the Zarathustrian order, Yasna 3, 24 and 25. And the piece at the end is in the Gathic dialect, and therefore an especially fitting prelude to the Confession of Faith in Yasna 12. A lot of Jewish prayer books, you have up to 4 languages, really. You have the Aramea, and then you have the Hebrew, and then you have different periods of each of those, and you can get quite a variety sometimes in such texts. And the Mosaic Confession. This piece of the